What on earth is going on in the north?
This morning, Hezbollah firing a mass barrage of 170 rockets into Israel in less than 2 hours.
They have about 10 times the weaponry that Hamas have.
In the last 48 hours, we had about 4 anti-tank missiles launched into our houses. The only hope lies in effective cooperation between Israel and the U.S.
This never would have happened without the Biden administration.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Quad from our Jerusalem studios with 2 guest hosts this week because, unfortunately, there's a bug going around in Tel Aviv and Vivian and Emily are out for the count, but they will be back next week. With me is Chama Mechtaly, activist, think tank, part of the Atlantic Council, half Muslim, half Jewish, 100% Zionist. That's your description. Thank you for being with us for the whole month of June and maybe even July. And a special guest co-host, the wonderful Malkah Fleisher, activist, First Lady of Hebron, decolonized Judean. Thank you for being with us, Malkah. And if you like our show, please subscribe and like so that you don't miss any episodes. So this week, ladies, we wanted to talk about what on earth is going on in the north, because the whole of global media is completely obsessed with the Hamas conflict, Gaza conflict, as are we, because that's where our young men and women are fighting every day. That's where our hostages are. That's who started this. But what's been going on since October 8th is something that people haven't really focused on, which is that, yes, we are already in a low-grade war. Some people wouldn't even say it's low-grade because they've been sending missiles every single day. We've been fighting back. And now the focus of the attention, and different governments are talking to us, telling us off, what's going to happen with the north of Israel. Now, a war with the north of Israel, and Chama, you are our Middle East expert here, but a war with the north of Israel means a much heavier, intense, dangerous war, because they have about 10 times the weaponry that Hamas have. The estimate is between 70,000 and 120,000 missiles that they have. They have more than a country. This is Hezbollah. This is what Hezbollah has managed to do within Lebanon, which is supposed to be a country, but they've kind of taken over. And we have 60,000 Israeli evacuees, internal displaced people in this country that nobody talks about, of course. We can talk about the Gazan evacuees and moving a population from here to there, but nobody talks about the fact that 60,000 Israelis cannot live in their homes and some of their communities have been completely destroyed, and we don't even know when the return to that is. And of course, how could we forget the Iranian attack, which again coordinated. So Chama, you know a lot about Lebanon and Hezbollah. How do you see what's happened so far and what's going to happen from here on?
Absolutely. There's so much to say there. Well, first of all, I want to say since October 7th, since Hezbollah started shooting rockets into the north of Israel, public opinion in Lebanon has been really divided about what should happen. And I would say a lot of people are heavily critical of Hezbollah. This is not new. They have been very critical of Hezbollah over the last few years. I don't know if people remember, but there was a major explosion in Beirut, in the port of Beirut in August 2020.
Ton of people died, no?
Yes, hundreds of people died, a couple hundred people died. And it just created this chaos and shock across Lebanese society, who knew that it was because Hezbollah was hiding weapons in the storage unit in the port.
And the media never really reported it. They were rumors, they talked about it, but it wasn't like this is Hezbollah's fault.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of tiptoeing around terrorism in general, specifically around Hezbollah. And so it presents similar challenges to what we're seeing, for example, in Gaza. If you're critical of the terrorist organization that has become effectively the governing body that is holding the Lebanese society hostage, then you risk your own life.
Is Lebanon done, Chama?
Lebanon has been pretty much on the path to becoming a failed state. Some argue that it is already a failed state. There's incredible resilience in Lebanese society in general, but effectively it's being sustained by remittances from the Lebanese diaspora abroad. 4 in 5 Lebanese people live outside of Lebanon. I wonder why that is, because if you know any Lebanese person, you know how passionate they are about living in Lebanon, about Lebanese culture. But they can't, because Hezbollah has made it completely impossible to live there and is constantly provoking Israel, which is what we're seeing today. And I think it's really important to frame this right, because Hezbollah has a history of provoking Israel, specifically when it becomes weak internally. When there are a lot of fingers being pointed at Hezbollah, a lot of criticism. This criticism didn't start with the explosion. It started with the assassination of the former Lebanese Prime Minister, Rafah al-Hariri,
whose son then was the prime minister, right?
whose son Saad was supposed to be prime minister, and then there was a lot that happened following that. And so the Lebanese people are tired of Hezbollah. They understand they're being held hostage. They know Hezbollah uses public infrastructure, including not just port storage units, but also airports, to hide weapons, to smuggle weapons from Iran. And so it's a really interesting model in a way, because at the very least, you see a lot of Lebanese people criticizing Hezbollah and bringing these things out into the public so much more than in other places.
So what's going to happen if there's a war with Israel? God forbid, if we get to that point, because we have to get our territorial integrity back, or we have to put people back in their communities. What's going to happen in Lebanon? Is anybody kicking out Hezbollah? No.
Wow, great question. It's really tough. Without American support,
We go back to that.
Without Israeli-American collaboration, there is no way that Hezbollah would just cease to exist.
Well, unless we got rid of the regime in Iran, and then there would cease to be a strategic
Like
threat.
Emily says, the head of the snake. Absolutely.
The head of the snake.
But even then, it would be really difficult, because even if you go after the head of the snake, the mini snakes can still be emboldened. So really, the only hope lies in effective cooperation between Israel and the U.S. and the regional governments of moderates who are not in Lebanon, specifically in the Gulf, so like Saudi Arabia, who have been trying to fight this Islamist radicalism even within Lebanon.
So I want to pick up on something you said and ask Malkah, who's our resident panelist American here. Chama speaks about the fact that Israel and America have to be like ironclad in order to deal with all these threats. How do you see what's going on at the moment? We started off with Biden saying don't, and now basically this week said, if you go into war with Hezbollah, you're on your own.
Well, in my opinion, I never thought of myself as like an American representative, but I would say that if I had to analyze the situation, I would say that I think that there's really two Americas. There's America, which is represented by the U.S. House of Representatives, and those people overwhelmingly support Israeli strength, justice for Israel, justice against Hamas, the end of terrorism. They know full well that terrorism will not just limit itself to like the Jews, but it will go forth and be a threat to them wherever it is that they are. You know, the Iranians are always saying death to America, death to Israel.
Big
Where,
and
like,
little Satan.
if you want to talk about ironcladness, like Iran definitely thinks that we have like an ironclad relationship with the United States and thinks that we all deserve destruction together.
Yeah.
So there's that America, which is the pro-Israel America, the incredible Congress people and senators who have like stood up so loud and proud for Israel in such a bold way that I wish more Israeli politicians would be doing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's like the Biden administration America, which has an obsession with restraining Israel, has some kind of like financial and other power plays going on in the region that keep it, that want to make sure that Israel stays like a little serf in its big kingdom. And that is the America that is like facing a big question mark actually right now.
I just don't see we were talking about this. I don't see the logic in terms of psychological warfare for the administration to say, you're on your own, especially when we know that Iran are backing Hezbollah. So essentially, you could look at this as a proxy war, Iran versus America, good versus evil, through Hezbollah and through Israel. But they're saying we're not in the fight. It just seems, I don't know.
America wants to play all the fields because then it can maintain all the control. I mean, we all know that the United States was doing fantastically with its sanctions against Iran, and everything was moving in the right direction. And then the Biden administration comes and yanks out all the sanctions. And basically, we all know that Iran, either it is about to have a nuclear weapon or it has a nuclear weapon. It's right there. And this never would have happened without the Biden administration. Like, we would be in such a different place.
So I think there is an aspect of fear in the U.S. and the American administration. There is that sort of post-Iraq war fear of repercussions.
Getting dragged in?
Of getting dragged
But
in,
how
of
could they
having troops
not?
on the ground.
Troops on the ground, I can.
I mean, they brought their
Precisely.
troops to our ground just like a few minutes ago. They built a big port thing, and they said we're coming, and they're bringing a port, and they're bringing their soldiers, and they're sending like these huge aircraft carriers through the ocean to Israel.
Half the port
So it
washed
seems
up
to me
on
like
Tel
they'd
Aviv.
actually love to put some soldiers
Half
on
the
the ground.
port apparently washed up on a Tel Aviv beach.
Oops.
No, I mean, I thought it was a bad idea from the beginning. But in terms of like, this is, we know we're in a regional power play war. The question is, why doesn't anybody else understand this? I'm sure they do. Do they think Israel's being overly aggressive? I just don't understand how they can be telling us to show restraint. What would America be doing if, missiles today, month of June, apparently, it was quadruple the amount of missiles than all the previous months that we've been receiving. They've killed people. They've killed Americans. We have the whole Houthi mess in the Red Sea channel that is making everybody's Amazon, the prices are going up of delivery. They're having to find alternative delivery routes. And I just think, don't they understand that you got to stand up to bullies?
Yeah, but the problem is they don't even see them as bullies. I mean, Hezbollah, for example, has missiles and weapons that can reach as far as 180 kilometers into Israel. They can reach into the center and the south of Israel. But in the U.S. and in the West, Hezbollah, like all of these other Iranian proxies, are seen or are represented as these small militia groups, small resistance movements that are really just fighting for minority groups. That is not true. These are terrorist organizations that have become governing bodies that are interested in a new order for the region and for the world.
And the order is America out and Israel out. So Malkah, as somebody who's living in a wonderful heartland of Judea, how are the tensions? Do you feel any of this there?
The war has been an interesting experience for the residents of Judea and Samaria. It's a little bit different than how mainstream media often likes to portray the situation, in which Judea and Samaria is this like volatile place where it's impossible to live normally, and everyone there is certainly crazy. And if only they would come back to like real normal Israel, then everything would kind of be calmer and saner.
Well, we know how that worked in Gaza.
Judea and Samaria has actually been remarkably quiet throughout the course of this war. Rockets have not been landing in Judea and Samaria. They've been landing in regular Israel. At the beginning of the war, across Judea and Samaria, we took in refugees from Gaza, from the north. Some of them stayed.
Wow.
Now we're dealing with a little bit of a repercussion, I guess, of the war, which is that now the current administration is trying to reopen the doors to Palestinian Authority workers in Judea and Samaria and encourage a return basically to the kind of relationships that took place prior to October 6th,
if nothing happened.
6th, but we're not having it. The residents of Judea and Samaria have learned very well. We saw exactly what happened on October 7th, and we are not going to go backwards. So there's been a major struggle across Judea and Samaria to try and express in every possible way to the administration that we do not accept. We're talking about 80% of people throughout Judea and Samaria said in polls, meaning to say they would willingly say to other people that they support the wanton rape, murder, mutilation, kidnapping, killing of women, children, elderly.
And now
They'll say it to someone, right? Like, which means that they're not ashamed of it. When do you remember 80% of any group of people saying, like, we think this one thing? Like, that is an overwhelming support for a certain ideology. And here we're talking about approximately 80%, a little bit less than 80% of people saying we support terrorism against Jews just cause. And so we're not ready. It's not that we're not ready. We have closed the door. We have closed the door to the idea that we are going to accept back into our midst anyone who would hold on to an ideology like that. We are post-October 7th, people.
Yeah, right. That's the tragedy of this global movement emboldening terrorism and emboldening Hamas, because they're actually hurting Palestinian people. And that civilians, the farmers, I mean, I remember meeting Palestinian farmers in Judea and Samaria, and they would tell me, before wars, for example, this meeting happened right after May 2021, right, if you remember what happened. And before that war, these farmers would go into communities and sell their produce and have really positive relationships. And even they would tell me, as Palestinians, we feel safe being with these neighbors, with these communities, going in and out, and we feel actually protected. So if like an outsider moves into the community and tries to target us, we have our friends in the community who call the army, call the police and say, you gotta have this person's back because we know this person. We can back up this person, stand behind them. And so that's...
And now you have a guy who walks into Kalkilia last week to get some fruits and vegetables for his shop, and he gets brutally murdered. So,
right. Unfortunately, also in Judea and Samaria, we kind of, we are painted so erroneously and so frequently as these like dogmatic iron walls, and you can't speak to us, and we don't negotiate with anyone over anything, and we hate everyone, and it's so false. Where I come from in Judea, there's a lot of very, very moderate people who have worked for years and years with local populations on private projects, public projects, whatever, all kinds of regular life stuff. And we were waiting after October 7th to start receiving the phone calls. Listen, I'm out in a field right now. I can't, let's even say you feel endangered to say out loud. You're like, I'm out in a field somewhere by myself and no one can hear me. And I just needed you to know, David, that I worked with for 25 years, I need you to know that I do not stand for this.
And nothing came?
We waited for muhtars of local villages to be like, listen, we have like 50% of our people work inside your communities. We just want you to know we're distancing ourselves from this.
And they didn't?
Zero phone calls. I'm involved heavily in this issue.
I know you are.
So I have been like listening to people. And you can't imagine the heartbreak and disappointment of people who have held on to beliefs for so long that really there is like an element that we can work with within society that can brush off this old ideology.
Well, this is what happened. This is what happened to the people who were living in the border towns of Gaza.
Yeah, right.
It's unbelievable.
Realization.
I have to say, for my part, that I did get a few phone calls from East Jerusalem. So maybe
that's good.
We did something right. And on that happy note, we're very happy to have a guest into this week, somebody who's an expert on the North. And now we have the privilege of having with us Liat Cohen-Raviv, who wears many hats. But firstly, she is a resident of Metula, which is the border town with Lebanon that is today abandoned and under attack. She's also the founder of a civilian forum for the north of Israel, and she's also on the emergency forum of Metula and has been doing incredible work since the 7th of October and, of course, much before. Liat, you come from a town, as I said, that's been one of the worst affected by the shelling, by the already low-grade war we're at. And so, first of all, I want you to describe to our viewers, what is Metula? What was Metula before the 7th, 8th of October? And then tell us what it's like today.
Using the word was Metula makes me so sad. But I think it's that's the correct word to use at this point. Metula is, if you open the map, you'll be surprised to know that it is the only place in the world, I think, that is surrounded by a hostile border at 72% of its fence. So usually you have 21 communities on the fence, on the border with Lebanon, from Rosh Hanikra to Mechtaly, and some of them has 10%, 50% fence, but Metula has 72, which is maybe explains a little bit of the drama and the intensive shelling that is going on over there, and the fact that as of today, it is a closed army area again, based on things that happen.
So no residents.
Well, actually, there are no residents from October 8th. So in that sense, people woke up on October 7 and they were like, okay, this should have been going on here and maybe it could still happen here. We should flee immediately. And that was actually the situation. So since then, there's only this first respond team. We have we can say number, but we have a few members of our own communities serving on that team. 2 of them got hurt 2 days ago, hurt by a direct anti-tank missiles that was launched directly to the car that they were driving at. They were accompanying a family from Metula that went to our house to try to take out some of their valuables because the house was destroyed a night before. So then that's this is the last 48 hours that gives you a bit of the story of what's happening to a community that is 128 years old. But I think in Metula specifically, because it's a very ancient community, it's one of the first settlements of the north of Israel, and it was one that was there at 48 when they, even earlier after the World War, when they divided the mandatim between the French and the Brits. So it was there to make sure that a lot of ground was kept on the Israeli side.
So if you paint us a picture today, do we have destroyed houses? Are things still standing?
So 620 houses in general, about 200 of them are severely damaged. 40 plus needs to be you need to demolish and rebuild again. And the rest is just major.
Liat, where are the residents of Metula today?
So today, only 10% of our community stayed in the hotels that all the community was evacuated to at October, because the whole scene of the hotel thing is not convenient for anyone.
Also not great for families with little kids.
No, it's challenging for everyone. So at this point, and by the way, the whole 70,000 people who are evacuated from their homes, 10% all around, is currently at hotels. The majority of the people left looked for a place that could be, give a sense of home or something that is more personal, where they can cook their own food and their kids could have their own, space. So we are scattered all over.
That's so sad to hear. And in terms of what you guys are doing, you're in both the emergency civilian team, but you're also in the group of people thinking about what's going to be with the day after in the north. So before we get to the day after, what are your fears now in the next few weeks? People are talking about an imminent war. And again, I don't think the world understands 2 things. One is that we're in an imminent war that already really started on October 8th with the north. And the second thing is that there's 70,000 displaced people in Israel. People talk about the displaced Gazans. Nobody talks about the displaced Israelis. So what are your fears now in the next few weeks?
Oh, okay. So there's a dispute among the people that lives in the north. So one perspective that we need to respect is the fact that people needs to see the resolution, right? They need to see security coming. And we've seen visuals in the south of Israel that made people feel like we are gaining our power again, and we are leading to a solution, or we are bringing security to the people by doing this and that. In the north, nothing's happening. We are responding. We are not proactive. And if that will be, tomorrow morning, they will announce that there is a
there's a resolution. We've come to an agreement. It will be very, very challenging, both because it is when you are in the north, you really experience what you just said. It's an actual war. I just described the fact that in the last 48 hours, we had about 4 anti-tank missiles launched into our houses. 4 houses were totally, ruined and burned. And 2 of our first response team members were injured. One of them is like severely injured, still in the hospital and so on. So this is the reality. This is a war reality. So you can wake up the next morning and say, we got an agreement. Also remember that if you have an agreement, you're going to do it with Lebanon, the country, which is the government there is very weak. It's very challenging to reach an agreement with a very weak government that can control their own people. Like everybody says Hezbollah attacks Israel. Well, Hezbollah is a part of the government in Lebanon. It's Lebanon attacking Israel. So that's like one thing. On the other hand, you and I both know that if this thing escalates, it's not going to be a challenge for the north of Israel. It's going to be a challenge for Israel, Nekuda. And if it escalates dramatically, it's going to be a challenge for the whole Middle East.
So, Liat, do you feel that as a result of the fact that there's no day off to plan by the government, or maybe you'll tell me there is, this is why you founded this forum? Do you feel like, once again, the civil society of this country needs to kind of take charge of this?
Well, I think that we've learned from October until now that we all need to take charge. There's, putting all your trust in one side, one organization, it's not going to work. Like everybody needs to be responsible and take ownership on what's happening. And I think especially the people in the north. I'm sure that because you are, in the midst of everything, but the north of Israel was the weakest region in the country in so many parameters. In many, many ways, we are weaker than the south of Israel. But
explain
socioeconomically, periphery-wise, in terms of income per, house, relatively to the center and the south, it's the weakest of all. And that is not what we wish for ourselves moving forward. I think that this crisis brings like the big as the crisis is, the opportunity that it presents to bring back the true vision of what the North needs to be, and to bring it to the level and the standards of at least the rest of the country, if not more, is now. And if it's not going to happen now, I don't see where it's going to happen in the next 50 years.
I totally agree. And I'm so much in admiration of Israeli society in the sense that, not only are we going to, this resilience, that not only are we going to get through this, but we're going to get through this and we're going to come out bigger and better. I love that. I love that. And you are personifying that.
Listen, Golda Meir said years ago that pessimistic is not something that a Jewish person can afford.
We can't afford it. We can't afford to be pessimistic. No, but this is more than being pessimistic. This is more than being optimistic. This is thinking how we're going to come out bigger and better and stronger. And that's incredible.
I think if the both of us can call people who are listening just to be proactive about the future that you want to see, I think that's a gain for everyone. Because I think people, I even see the people in the north. They are now at the weakest place in their lives. It's very hard. People are super challenged. Not that the 70,000 who are evacuated, also the 30,000 that are still living in the valley and the mountain, and in the midst of the war, and everything is happening above their heads. So we're talking about 100,000 people. And at this point, people understand that something needs to happen. I think that the next level is to understand that whatever happens, we need to make it happen. We can't wait for it to just, fall on our heads and be the future that we're wishing for. And in that sense, I will, another message that maybe is important, maybe we should not try to solve the whole problem. Maybe we should focus on making the first step towards solution. And then if we're all 100,000 people are taking one step forward in the place that they are at, looking at their family, their community, their their town, moshav, kibbutz, city, wherever they come from, it will bring change. It will bring change.
That's amazing, Liat. If you could just take us a little bit into your hat as the civilian forum, thinking about the day after. What do you see? What are your conversations around the table with this incredible civilian forum for the day after that you've set out?
So the name of the forum is Matspinim. In Hebrew, that has like double meaning. It's also very active, Matspinim. We are going north, and we have a compass that, only looks to the north. Our perspective is, that the day after will come. If it comes with a war or the agreement will be there, it will shesh אחרי המלחמה will arrive, and we're going to be there. And the question is how that future is going to look like. And for us, it's very clear that it has to be better. It has to be better for the thousands of people who will return to the north, because they understand that it's a national mission at this point. We are at 48 all over again when it comes to the north of Israel. But also because they understand that we need to get ready. It's going to be a hostile border moving forward. No one is going to solve the problem with Hezbollah. It's not Hamas, it's not this like small, whatever, terroristic organization. We have our challenges in the south anyways. But this is it's a country and an ideology that is bigger than all of us. So that is the reality. So when people are coming back, they need to understand that they need to come back with stronger, with resilient, and with orech ruach, like patient. With a bit of a patient, but also need to become very proactive. So our vision is
with nerve.
And our vision is we are no longer thinking as small communities because we don't count. Look at what's happening now. No one sees Kiryat Shmona, which is one of the biggest cities it has 23,000 people. It's like a neighborhood where you come from. Like, who is together? We have more power. We have more voice. And also we have, 1 and 1 can be 3. Like the potential of us making our own lives better is dramatically more extent if we work together as, a joint community. So everything that Matspinim is doing is looking at the north of Israel through a region perspective. So how does the education need to look lens. Like, when you're looking at a region, and how the big cities are important for the small communities, and people are working in cooperation instead of against one another.
Which is really part of the problem and part of what got us here. And, I just have to say this. Honestly, it takes a woman to say we need to work together and not in competition, and let's create consensus. And with consensus comes the power of that block. And I love that's what you're doing, Liat, and anything that we can do to help you.
Thank you for hosting us and for bringing the voice of the North to the front.
And now, for a very interesting and popular segment, Scumbag of the Week. Malkah, this is your first Scumbag of the Week, even though for years you've been pointing them out, according to your X account, which I follow avidly. Everybody follow her. Who's your scumbag this week?
So I'll be honest with you, Fleur, as a first-time scumbag outer, it's like a little bit uncomfortable for me to talk about someone as a scumbag. So I'm going to pivot and just talk about somebody that I would like to criticize a little bit for this week.
Disappointee of the week?
Someone disappointed me this week. And it's somebody who I actually do not like to criticize often in public. Okay. But I feel since I'm in this forum, maybe this is my opportunity to bring it out, which is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
You have something you agree with Vivian about?
I am not like a BBist, as they say. I'm not a person who's like only BB. And I know how to criticize the prime minister, but I don't in this period of time like to pile on to him like so many people are trying to do, like cynically using this moment to try to oust him. But I will say that he did something this week that I did not like. He did an interview with Israel's Channel 14 News.
Yes, I saw bits.
In which, and it was a nice interview, except he said something that was awful, which was that he said, when asked about what is the future, what is like the day after for Gaza, he said, well, one thing is that resettling Gaza is not realistic, meaning to say putting back in Jews who were forcibly extracted from there to live is not realistic.
שאני חושב שאנחנו צריכים, א', לקחת מהם שטח ברצועת עזה, כמחיר שהם משלמים על מה שהם עשו, לדיראון עולם על הדבר הזה, וגם כי זו זכותנו, כי זו ארץ ישראל שלנו, וגם להתיישב ברצועת עזה.
אני חושב שזה לא ריאלי. אני חושב שזה לא ריאלי, וזה לא משרת את מטרות המלחמה שלנו. אני חושב שאנחנו צריכים שליטה צבאית, ואם צריך שאנחנו נהיה במקומות שונים בתוך הרצועה, אנחנו נהיה. ככל שהדבר יידרש, אני חושב שהעניין של ההתיישבות הוא לא ריאלי, ואני מנסה להיות ריאלי.
Why is he wrong?
I'll tell you why he's wrong.
Right.
I will lay out my criticism.
All right.
The reason that I think he's wrong is a few reasons. One is I'm upset with here's what I'm upset with.
Okay.
I'm upset with the fact that he would say such a thing out loud.
Even if it's true.
Even if it were so true, the one thing that Hamas cares about, it ain't life. It figured that out, okay? It's not PR, because they'll have all the good PR that they could ever want ever just for existing and fighting the Jews. It is land.
It's territorial integrity.
And if we were to say to them, actually, you know what's going to happen if you don't bring back our hostages and stop attacking us immediately and disband this disgusting cultish death organization that you have going? We're just going to start taking land. Every day, we're just going to start taking land, more land, and we can, and we will. That is what, in my opinion,
in other words, even if that's not realistic,
right?
It should always be on the table because that's a real threat to Hamas. I give you that.
Right, even if it weren't realistic. But as a person who fought personally, actively on the ground, the expulsion from Gaza in 2005,
wow,
screaming to anyone who would listen, don't do this. There are going to be wars out of here. There are going to be deaths out of here. They are going to make your life hell from this place. And I like being right, but I didn't like being right about this. But I am right about this. The war, the terror comes out of Gaza on a regular basis to say that putting Jewish families who are willing to hold on to land, who are willing to implant themselves so that there can be a strong and reasonable military force in Gaza, to say that that's not realistic, but running a multi-billion-dollar war every few years is realistic, is not realistic in my opinion. So I think that not putting Israelis into Gaza is the unrealistic plan. On top of everything, he happened to say this during a weekly Torah portion, in which you are particularly not supposed to say things like this, which is Parshat Shlach. In this week's Torah portion, the spies go to the land of Israel, and they're like, it's not realistic. They go, it's not realistic. It's not realistic to come in. There's a bunch of giants. We're going to be like grasshoppers in their eyes. We're teensy-weensy. And then it created a horrible balagan, a horrible nightmare for the Jewish people after that throughout history. So to use this week's Torah portion, maybe it was, fate for him to do that and to repeat this horrible error of the 10 spies. But to do it on this week's Torah portion, well, what we really need to do is go, it's realistic. Everything we try to do is realistic. We want to live over here, it's realistic. We want to be free of terror, it's realistic. We want to build a beautiful, flourishing Jewish state where everyone can live and express themselves freely, realistic. It's not the time to be telling Jewish people who are fighting so hard to hold on to their normal lives, to tell them that basic security is not realistic.
Well, Rebitz and Malkah, you're beginning to sound very convincing. But I get what you're saying. I'm not sure that I want us to waste all our energy and bandwidth with reoccupying Gaza, I've got to be honest. But you're right about the rhetoric, because it's always about the rhetoric.
Yeah, and speaking of which, since we're talking about Lebanon in this episode, on May 24th, 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew from Lebanon
too. So that was the year of Lebanon, and that was the year of Gaza. And look where we are. We try and give land for peace, and we get wars. Okay.
All right. So,
Chama, your scumbag of the week.
My scumbag of the week, and I know, Malkah, I share your sentiments about using the word. I've never said the word scumbag until I got on this show, and I'm so glad I did.
Isn't it therapeutic?
It's been real therapy that I needed since October. My scumbags of the week come to us from Paris, from France, where two teenage rapists, essentially, two 12-year-olds, basically kidnapped a French Jewish girl, also 12 years old. One of the rapists was her ex-boyfriend or friend, and he forcibly took her away to an empty area by La Défense to rape her for being Jewish. And he said that he was so angry that she hid her Jewish identity from him. And I think that shows a lot of things. One, how unsafe it is for Jews really all over the world outside of Israel, how it is unsafe and has been so unsafe for French Jews to just exist and having to hide and constantly conceal their identity to exist. But it also shows how rape is actively and constantly being used to intimidate and force Jewish women into submission and into brokenness. We obviously saw how systemic that is in Hamas as an organization with what they did on October 7th. And we also saw it with ISIS against Yazidi women, against Kurdish women.
So your scumbags are these boys, these disgusting boys?
Yes, who were convicted yesterday and will be standing trial for their horrific crimes.
Well, scumbag is not a strong enough word, I would say.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chama. It's tragic what happened in France. And I think it's shocked France. And I think it might actually help the right win even more when they have elections very, very soon.
Marine Le Pen is climbing up the roof.
She really is. So my scumbag this week is an American politician, a representative called Jamal Bowman. He's a representative of the North Bronx. I mean, apart from the fact this guy is just so, how do I say it, has zero class, swears the whole time. He's made his entire campaign about the ceasefire. Like, what do the people of Northern Bronx and their issues have to do with the ceasefire? We've been seeing this all around the world, people basically climbing onto this kind of populist, anti-Jew, anti-Israel. And so him and, of course, ritual scumbag AOC, they got together in such a cringy video. Honestly, I don't think they did themselves any favors. Again, just using bad language and pretending to be cool, trying to be cool, and just making this whole thing about Gaza. And he said some horrible things. He's an anti-Semite.
Let's go! And are you ready to fight for peace on earth and ceasefire in Gaza?
We're gonna show them who the we are! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
Our recurring hero, Richie Torres, who's from a very similar neighborhood, I think he's from South Bronx, he's calling him out, and he's been so amazing, Richie Torres. He's everything that this Jamal Bowman is not. So he's my scumbag of the week. And, ladies, as every week we try and finish on a positive note, put a little bit of light onto a very dark time for us people, for us Jewish people. We want to talk about our heroes of the week. So, starting with you, Chama, who's your hero this week?
My hero of the week is actually a dear friend of mine. Her name is Mechtaly, and she's a spiritual leader in New York City, leads something called the Downtown Minyan. And she's also a sociologist who has specialized in studying American Jewry and Syrian Jewry in New York. And she wrote an incredible piece on CNN.
I saw that.
Yeah, really detailing this moment and what it means and what it carries for the Jewish community, specifically for young people. Downtown Minyan is known to be a really young minyan, young space where there are a lot of progressive and liberal young Jews. And she described this feeling of betrayal that we alluded to earlier, of how this young Jewish community is being canceled everywhere for being Jewish. And she described to CNN how that's actually fueling and renewing and reinvigorating Jewish identity.
It's incredible.
Which is, obviously, it's bittersweet how it's happening, but she is helping us see, in a way, the silver lining of this moment is that more people than ever, more Jews all over the world are feeling more and more connected to Israel and see truly for the first time after being convinced that they've integrated into America that the only safe refuge for Jews is and will remain Israel.
Well, thank you, Chama. Michal is a worthy hero indeed. What about you, Malkah? Who's your hero this week?
I have to go back to them. The Jews of Judea and Samaria are my hero this week. They have just, every Israeli is, we've seen so many over the course of these many months of the war. We've seen these videos of people who are like gold. You just wonder, like, how did I not know that, like, every person next to me is like an angel, like a gem? These, like, the amount of giving and the amount of self-sacrifice is just amazing. But I am still going to highlight today the Jews of Judea and Samaria specifically. Recently, unfortunately, in our community, even though we're so often villainized as somehow being a drain on society, in actuality, we have a huge draft rate in the Israeli army, and some of the top officers in different units. And unfortunately, some of the recent fallen come from Judea and Samaria. And these are people who continue to give and continue to fight as if this was like their first day. Wow. They get up in the morning and they're excited for the state of Israel, and they believe in the IDF, and they serve with all their might, and they will call out the enemies on the outside, and they will call out the enemies on the inside, and they will struggle, and they get denigrated, and they get insulted, and they get sidelined and othered and treated like they are not the treasures of society as that they are. But they have such an incredible strength of belief and faith in what this project is, not just for themselves, but for everyone else, including the people that don't agree with them and don't like them. They are incredible, strong people.
I agree with you. They're the best, and so committed, and so much faith. Thank God. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful heroes. And my hero this week, just as you were kind of reservation about, the S word on the Prime Minister, I want to say this man is a hero, but I also want to qualify it. So Ben Stiller, who is a famous Hollywood actor, after all of these months has come out and written an incredible piece talking about Israel, what we suffered on October 7th, anti-Semitism in America. Of course, he talks about, innocent Palestinian lives. We're all people who feel for them, but he doesn't, pander to this kind of sickly, Hollywoody, there's victims on both sides, completely, because that's what we've seen from a lot of Jews in Hollywood. Now, Ben Stiller's father's Jewish, and he's come out and proud, talking also about his own Jewish identity. And so I want to make him my hero, but I just feel, where's everybody been for the last 8 months? Yeah. I'm happy he's done it. He runs a risk of being canceled, because that's what Hollywood is at the moment. So it's brave to come out. It's brave to talk like this. I wish more Jews would do it. But again, I think, okay, better late than never, but I want to just, classify it a little bit. But Ben Stiller, yes, you are our hero this week, and I hope more people take the example that you've set as a proud Jew to come out and say, enough is enough. The world's turned against us again. We're not going to stand for it. So we hope that you inspire more people to do what you've done.
And it's okay to take the space to learn instead of just coming out with a statement early on. That
exactly.
Or
doing the eyes on Rafah sheep thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So on that positive note, we thank our wonderful guest co-hosts, and we hope to see you all next week. But most of all, we pray that by next week, our hostages will be home with their loved ones. Thank you for watching.